2014 Ann Arbor DDA meeting. Call of the board members: Cindy Clark, Russ Collins.
Here.
Bob Gunzel.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
Joan Lowenstein. Al McWilliams.
Here.
John Mowat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Thor.
Here.
Steve Powers.
Here.
Sandy Smith. John Split.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So this is the time in our agenda when we ask for any audience participation. Folks have up to 4 minutes. And I think Martha Forti has signed up. Yeah.
So good afternoon. Again, my name is Marta Valadez. I came to the last board meeting and presented myself as the Partners for Transit campaign organizer, which I still am, but now I'm also working as the More Buses field organizer. So I did leave some information at your table just before you guys got here. And it kind of gives a little bit of details about the campaign. Our contact information is on there. And so I'm here today now to kind of talk a little bit about the importance of this campaign and in hopes of getting your organization's support, the board support for the millage proposal that will be on the ballot on May 6th. So the ballot proposal is for a 0.7 millage, which would be for the Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and Ypsilanti Township area. This, as you may know already, the services are going to be significant for the community. This is something that we've been having dialogue with community organizations and individuals on the ground about, and the same thing we kept hearing: weekend evening service, more direct routes, getting a better interconnected urban core in the Washtenaw County. So this is imperative for us. This is going to be very significant for community members. We started phone banking already, and the feedback we've been getting is very receptive and positive. Our volunteers are very committed to the work that we're doing because it's going to change a lot of people's lives. I mean, we have a volunteer last night who didn't realize that bus service was going to be, she can work more hours here now and not have to worry about struggling getting home late during the week. She lives all the way in the township and comes all the way to Ann Arbor every day. So for her to get home at night is very, very difficult, especially on the evenings of the weekdays and the weekend evenings. So it's very important. So I'm coming to the board to ask your support for the 5-year plan that this funding service would supplement or would support. I'm looking to see folks who want to endorse our specifically the millage proposal and the More Buses campaign. So there's the form that looks like this, and you would fill out and send back to us, or you can contact me and I can come pick up. And any sort of support, just saying that you formally endorse it as a business owner in the community, or that you'd like to make a contribution to our effort, or helping us just educate and inform the community about the millage and showing the truth and the facts about what this millage is about. We would love and appreciate that. So I think that's all I have. I'm going to be sticking around after the meeting, so if you'd like to talk with me and set up an appointment, a one-on-one to talk more in detail, make sure there's a clear understanding of what the plan of the service is and what the millage will be covering, I'll be available for that. So thank you.
Thanks, Martha. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the DDA board today? Seeing no one, reports from city boards and commissions. Mr. Ray Detter.
A major part of the last night's Citizens Advisory Council meeting was devoted to discussion of a recently filed lawsuit in the county's 22nd Circuit Court challenging the legal foundation of the City of Ann Arbor's footing drain disconnection ordinance. That is the FDD, or the footing drain disconnection. The ordinance was enacted in 2001. It establishes a program under which property owners can be required to disconnect their footing drains from the sanitary system. Its intent is to diminish the risk of sanitary overflows into the Huron River and sanitary sewage backups in homeowners' basements, but it does more than that. As pointed out in the February 28th edition of the Ann Arbor Chronicle, that's February the 28th, a motion for a preliminary injunction has also been filed, asking that the court order the city to stop enforcement of its ordinance immediately. Among the lawsuit's many claims is that it violates the U.S. Constitution prohibition against taking private property. They claim it is, in fact, unconstitutional. So this will be a case which will, if it goes that far in terms of appeals, will go to the Supreme Court. This suit really is very serious. is now scheduled to be heard in Judge Shelton's court by March 26th. The details are complex, and I'm certainly not going to go into it. I spent last night listening for quite a period of time with regard to that. And I suggest that you go to David Askin's excellent article for further information and clarity. If the lawsuit wins and an injunction is granted, it would have the effect of immediately impacting the downtown. That is private development, public development, or even by the University of Michigan, in terms of the nature of the implications of that, because all of that development is connected to the nature of those footing drains. A few other items that we covered last night, very briefly, is the CAC will support and will urge others to support the May 6th voter approval of the AATA request for an increased millage to improve our community's public transit service. It will provide, that program will provide $90,000 additional service hours for the greater Ann Arbor area. We also support, as you know, age diversity in downtown Ann Arbor, and as you also know, Courthouse Square. Senior citizen housing has been sold to Wycliffe Properties. We want to urge Wycliffe, the DDA, City Council, major developers, and the entire community to support housing projects that can help further age diversity in central Ann Arbor. We don't know yet what's going to happen in Courthouse Square. That's the direction that we want to go. In spite of recent City Council decisions, we also want to state our continued support of efforts of the city, individuals, groups, and organizations to make sure the commitment to more public art installations remains an important community goal. We also want to reaffirm our support for a public plaza and public walkways to Liberty Plaza as part of a plan for a new tax-producing private development on the major part of the library lot. We also continue to believe that any future private development should be encouraged to work cooperatively to integrate itself with and complement the adjoining public plaza, the library, the AATA, and all nearby public and private spaces. And finally, we want to welcome the new University of Michigan President, Mark Schlissel, and his family to downtown Ann Arbor. For the next 9 months, you may or may not know, they will be the inhabitants of Sloan Plaza, right next to 413 East Church. An interesting sort of an experience, while the President's historic home on South University is being renovated. We look forward to his being a neighbor, and of course, he'll be invited to the June party as well.
Thank you, Ray. Do we have any communications from DDA members?
I should give a brief report. Sorry. Just report on the connector study. We met yesterday after having not met for a month and went over some very preliminary cost estimates, as well as a status report on where our modeling is. The modeling is, for those who don't know, is a system where they take a lot of data, demographic data, or actually transportation data, and try to determine what ridership will be along this at any particular location. That will help ideally determine where stations should be located. It's a very complex set of processes they use. They're working, actually using Watts, the Washington Area Transit Studies, modeling and their input, and it's been going back and forth, and it's pretty, obviously very complex. It's been taking about 2 months trying to get it done, but it should be done by the middle of this month, and we will be getting that information at the end of this month, and then moving on to try to determine when or what the final alignment will look like. So we're kind of slogging through the technical part now.
Very good. Anyone else have anything for us? Seeing none. You'll see your copy of minutes on pages 2 through 7. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Moved. Second.
Anyone have any questions, concerns? If not, all those in support?
Aye.
Subcommittee reports. Operations Committee. Roger, are you got a resolution to approve a year-end management fee?
Yes. Those again, you may be new. Our contract with Republic Parking to operate the parking system essentially involves us covering their costs and then a management fee. The management fee is a potential $200,000 a year. $150,000 of that is guaranteed under their contract. The additional $50,000 is basically at the discretion of the board based on performance. And I would direct everyone to the memorandum on page 9, which describes some of the both the objective and subjective uses or criteria for the determination of the management fee. As you can see, results of surveys where there's a very high level of customer satisfaction in the system. Should point out that we had an operating budget surplus of over $1 million in this last year. A lot of credit of that goes to Art Lowe in working with his staff and with new technology to try to make the system operate as efficiently as we can. We have a parking inspector goes through and does his own reports to assess the condition and the maintenance of the system. And overall, I should actually go to page 10, I think. Above and beyond just the simple, straightforward operating part, I'd like to point out some of the other things that they've accomplished. Completed and opened the first in Washington parking structure, modernized parking equipment in 2 parking facilities, completed the parking structure office in Library Lane. We implemented a reserved parking. They implemented a reserved parking program for both the Art Fair and the Winter Classic. Had quite a challenge with both weather and a number of people for the puck drop on New Year's Eve and handled that quite well. It was a huge crowd, all leaving at the same time. Not to mention just the challenge of dealing with this winter has been exceptional. And I've been observing parking operations not only on the board before this, but for a number of years before that, before Republic Parking was in. And the quality of the job being done, the innovation being put forward, to me is really exceptional, particularly compared to where things were before Republic Parking took in, and even before Art became the director here. So we are proposing the full $50,000 discretionary fee, and I strongly endorse this. I could not be happier with the job that Republic Parking is doing on our system. And we really have one of the best maintained and operated systems in the country. So I'll be glad to answer questions.
We all know keeping Roger happy is not an easy thing.
That's my manager.
May we have a motion to
yes. I'd like to move the resolution.
Support. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Roger? Concerns? All those in favor?
Just a strict look at the statistics indicates that we're on an extremely high level compared to, in general. We're slightly above last year. So based on previous performance and current performance, this seems entirely warranted.
Well said. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor. Okay, next, is this for you to resolution to put forward the DDA budget?
Although if John Split would like to handle this, he's certainly welcome.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Thanks. The Operation Committee met before last week's retreat and came up with a budget proposal to proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which runs from July 1st through June 30th of 2015. We then listened to all of you at the retreat, and sort of frantically with Susan and Joe and John and I started crunching some numbers and trying to figure out how to incorporate the board's ideas into the upcoming budget. Recognizing that some things probably weren't, because of the time in design and construction, some things probably weren't going to get underway in the upcoming fiscal year. We're thinking particularly the sidewalk work, that we really would like to get the results of the sidewalk framework study done, which is going to be done at the end of this year, then prioritize which sidewalk work should go first, start the design work. So we took some money out of capital funds for that, but left enough in to get the design and engineering work started on the sidewalks. So everybody should have this one in their packet, as well as this was sent out with a packet. There should be one at your table, which is the new revised one. This is in the form that the city requires our budget to be presented to them in. Joe, if you could also, I think it's going to be easier if we also hand out this budget form. So,
We just have this.
Is this the same one that was at our table?
Resolution
okay.
in the packet.
Just, yeah, the ones, there are two different ones. The one that says, as recommended by DDA Operations Committee on 2/26, is what was put in the packet. The one we are proposing, which has the changes from the retreat, say under the top, as amended at DDA board meeting 3/5/14.
Just make sure everyone understands the 226 version was not in the packet that was sent out, but it was at our desk when we got here.
Yeah.
So we can
This is a little bit easier form to, and one we're familiar with, than we're hanging around right now. This is the form we've used in the past, and each fund is in a column, so we can look at each fund independently on both income and expenses. And I'm going to start just going down the TIF column to try and give sort of a fairly quick overview here. The 4.8 million is the number the city has given us as our anticipated TIF revenue. Interest is interest on money we have. Salaries, fringe benefits, administrative expenses are divided between the parking fund and the TIF fund. Professional services would be engineering, legal, insurance. Then getting down to the more discretionary expenses, we have $104,000 for holiday lights and sidewalk repairs that we have traditionally done and would intend to continue. The $200,000 transfer is to the housing fund. The $508,000 for the police court building is our annual contribution to pay for the bonds for that building. And the $114,000 is marketing, is what I think the board identified as marketing expense, potentially doing pedestrian counts as well as some discretionary money. We're just putting that in as one number because the board has not approved any specific expenditures yet, but that's money that was identified at the retreat to be spent in the marketing area. We reduced the capital expenditures a little bit because, as I mentioned earlier, we think it's going to be hard to get everything up and running under construction within one fiscal year, particularly if we're waiting on the sidewalks until we have the framework plan done and we know what we intend to do overall. And then on bonds and interest payment, we have bumped that up with in both that and parking, the intention of doing the project on the 4th and William, stair tower elevators, as well as some pedestrian improvements on that structure. So although we haven't approved the project yet, we are putting in money both for the down payment on the bond and increased bond payments to cover that, should that go forward. Housing, we're putting in $200,000 in transferring in, with the intention of spending approximately $275,000. So we have a fund balance from the previous year of anticipated at nearly $400,000. So we have enough. We will certainly have enough money to cover that, as well as leaving some money for discretionary expenditures should the board decide to do that. Parking revenue is what we anticipate with our current rate structure. Miscellaneous income is actually, I believe, money that we get from the university for the shared use of the forestry parking structure. Again, salaries, fringe benefits, and administrative expenses are shared with TIF. Professional services, again, this is various engineering, legal engineering studies, architectural fees, legal fees, insurance. The Republic parking expenses, facility rent is paid to parking lots that we do not own, that we manage for other people. The 3.19 is our 17% of parking revenue that we pay to the city under the under the contract. Utility expenses, so you can see the total parking expenses. The interfund transfers are money that goes into the parking maintenance fund to do major maintenance and repairs to the parking structures. Alternative transportation is essentially the Go Pass and the Get Downtown program, and that is their request for this year, although we have not yet approved it. And we do have $300,000 in for discretionary use in that fund. Then in capital costs, that $449,000 would be the down payment on a bond on the 4th and William structure. And again, the bond payments were bumped up from our original proposal. Parking maintenance, see the $2.1 million going in for maintenance, professional services, Carl Walker and various other engineers and guys. Parking maintenance is essentially smaller expenses. I think less than $5,000 that we do in the structures versus capital costs, which are major repairs such as, we do a whole bunch of things. Chipping off concrete, replacing concrete, putting new sealant on, major painting jobs, all the sorts of things you need to put into the parking structures to keep them in good shape, which they fortunately are, and because we've been doing this for a number of years. There are, for those who were not around, when the DDA took over the parking structures, they were in very sad repair. In fact, 3 had to be torn down and rebuilt. The others dramatically reconstructed. And we have a long-term policy of this board is to make sure that we put enough money into these structures every year so that we do not get into that situation again. That we maintain the structures so that they will live out their entire useful life. So overall, we are running a deficit in parking and parking maintenance, but we have significant reserves in those funds. Down the road, we're undoubtedly going to have to start looking at some at least inflationary increases in the parking rates to cover our costs. Housing, again, we have sufficient reserves. We're actually increasing our reserves slightly in TIF, So we end up with a total reserves of about 3.3 million, a little over 3.3 million. This is approximately 14% of our expenditures after several things are subtracted, which is the formula that the city uses, I guess the state uses, auditor uses to determine what our fund balance is as a relationship to expenditures. So ideally, we would like to be in the 18 to 20% range, but coming out of the big construction and keeping our momentum going, we think we're reasonable being at slightly above 14% at expenditures versus reserves, or fund balance versus expenditures. So that's a quick overview. This relates to this, although it's a difficult explanation. This is the form that is required, again, by the city and our auditors, that our budget be in when it is presented to City Council. The numbers here reflect this. I can make an attempt at the explanation if people would like these. I know, Bob, you had, I think, a question on housing. When we look at expenditures by funds, actually, that 277 does
No,
show
it
up.
does show up on
Does show
this.
up on the
Yeah, I
bill,
was looking at
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that was the, I think when we looked at it at the Ops Committee, there was no discussion of what money might be spent on. I think after we had discussions at the retreat, we decided that we should allocate money into that fund. So if the board chooses to spend it, it's there in our budget.
Could I ask a different question?
Sure, please.
On the housing, we have a pretty good fund balance there. And it looks like the dollars that are in the projected budget are going to be committed to the Housing Commission and to do the study. Would we be further ahead to move some of that money out of the reserve in case we have proposals to leverage our dollars for housing? Or is it best to leave it in the reserve with the understanding that obviously we could move it out during the year, but does that require a budget amendment that has to go to the city?
It does. So, yeah, that's a good question. I think that's our initial response of when we only had a couple thousand in there is that we should put money in there to be spent. It's certainly the board's decision on whether we want that number to be higher. We are not required, of course, to spend that money.
Right.
But you are quite correct that if we go over that amount of expenditures, we would require a budget amendment go to City Council. We would have to approve a budget amendment and submit it to City Council. So I guess I would, the will of the board.
Yeah, I would, at the proper time, then move an amendment to the proposed budget.
So I don't think
I
we
don't know if
moved
you-
the budget ahead. I would like to move the motion to move it.
Out of order.
Just start talking.
I know. You're supposed to.
Do we have support?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
So,
Well, any other questions, any other comments? Is it the director you want to make?
I just have a question, just for my own understanding. In that reserves calculation of typically 18, 20%, but we're doing 40%, traditionally, do we look at that in each fund? So like, for example, if you look at that balance versus expenditures in housing, it's obviously way high versus parking. Is that, or do you only look at it overall?
I believe we only look at it overall.
Okay, so
Now,
it's
as far as the auditor is concerned, although we show 4 funds, there are only 2 funds as far as when our books are audited. That would be a parking fund and a TIF fund, and housing would be part of the TIF fund.
I see.
And Joe, actually, I'm going to need some guidance here. Is the auditor concerned with the ratio of expenditures to fund balance in each separate fund, or just the overall for the, yeah.
Typically, they've been on each fund. When we
Okay.
went low a couple of years ago in the parking fund, they noted to us at our operations committee that that fund was, getting low.
Oh, okay.
But they only care about two funds.
They only care about
consider
two
it
funds. They view the way we've set this up as two separate funds, not four separate
Got
funds.
it.
But it's much easier for all of us to look at this
Sure.
as four separate funds, since they have
Sure.
different uses.
Absolutely.
Any other?
So if I, what I'd like to do is move an amendment that would add $100,000 to the housing fund and move that from the reserve.
Okay?
I
And
don't,
place that into the discretionary
yes.
line?
So I'm not sure what that would do with
we have
this
support for
document.
that?
Okay. So we would, now, so we are, so I'm clear, we are just proposing to increase expenditures under the discretionary line of the housing fund, which is now zero, and increase that to $100,000.
That's correct.
Correct? So our total expenses would be $377,000, not $277,000 budgeted. It would reduce our fund balance by then $100,000, so from $323,000 to $223,000.
Question, Bob?
Yeah.
John, if I may?
Yes.
Can you remind us what types of requests we may be considering this coming fiscal year for housing?
Well, right now, I don't know of any, but this organization's been very successful in putting up dollars, working with the city and the county and private developers to leverage projects. And I would just like that opportunity. I know we could take it out of fund balance. And as I say, I don't have a project, but I'd like to have some flexibility there because our dollars are going to the public side, primarily the Housing Commission and the city and the county to do the housing needs assessment, which I think is absolutely the right thing to do, but I'd like some discretionary funds there.
To continue that commitment going
Yes.
forward into the next fiscal year?
Yes.
It would have a slight effect on our ratio of expenditures to fund balance, but not a very significant change.
Small.
It's very small, probably, less than 0.5%.
Sorry, Joe.
100,000.
It's your money.
Do we need to take some action on that?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
We're still
we're
discussing.
proposing, I think that can just be a friendly amendment if.
Is it friendly?
What do you think, Jack?
I would prefer that we vote on it.
Yeah, okay. All right. So this is this is an amendment to the amendment, if I'm correct.
Right.
Okay. So this proposal that what you're looking at is amending what was in your packet. What Bob is proposing is amendment to that budget.
Well, but we should move the budget that's in front of us, not the budget that was sent out.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So if
All right,
that's new,
so-
then it's not an amendment.
Well, and I don't have my Robert's Rules of Order here. Susan,
So,
can you help us out? with-
the role of the committee is to put forward a proposed budget. It hasn't yet been sort of voted on, so it is, I think, within your discretion to make the changes at the table. So it's not an amended budget so much as it's the proposed budget, but after you've done your retreat.
Okay.
And then Bob would then make that other. So I don't know that you necessarily are voting on it. You're dealing with what's been proposed to you.
But don't we have to first vote on the amendment and then on the?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we would
Okay.
vote on Bob's amendment to
Yep.
the proposed
That's-
budget.
All right.
Okay.
Everyone following? Are we all on the same page? Any
Yeah.
other questions or concerns solely about the amendment? Bob's amendment.
This will not affect in any way our cash flow. I don't believe it does. Our cash flow concerns, the Housing Commission has come to us asking for a request. We still have enough money in our reserves to handle that request going out.
The answer is yes. What we sought from them was a question about timing, and the general understanding we have is that they could easily work with a 3 fiscal year expenditure cycle. That the way the way that the expenditures are going to go due to the construction cycle, if the board was willing to approve the full 600,000 and then apportion 200 grand a year for 3 fiscal years, the first being this fiscal year, we'd start this year. There would be sufficient funds for their purposes. Thank you.
Okay,
So it's a percentage, it's a 1% drop in the, does that matter?
Actually,
I
it's
just
not,
want-
it's not that much of a drop, because there are certain things that this, per the auditors, are not included in our expenditures. So for instance, the $449,000 that is the down payment of the bond is not part of our expenditures. And actually, I believe housing grants are not part of our expenditures. So actually,
Also doesn't matter.
it wouldn't, yeah, well, actually, it would not have any impact because, well, actually, our fund balance would go down, but our expenditures would go down by the same amount because housing is not part of the expenditures that are used for that calculation.
Okay.
It's only a drop if you spend it.
Yeah, it's only a drop if you spend it.
okay. Any other questions or concerns about the amendment to add $100,000 to the housing fund? If not, I ask all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those who don't support? Okay.
All right.
A question, someone asked me, or reminded me that the city recently passed an ordinance modifying some of our financial aspects, and part of that ordinance required that we fund housing, affordable housing at the rate of $300,000 a year. That's not contained in this budget?
No, and I think Joe can explain that that ordinance goes into effect, I believe, fiscal year 16, Joe?
The ordinance states that that takes place in tax year 16, which is fiscal year 17, so it's 2 years away.
So maybe you explained this and I wasn't paying attention,
I
but
probably, if I did, I didn't explain it very well.
in 2015, in the DDA proposed budget summary, this one,
Yes,
the total expenses are $26,531,972, correct?
correct.
In this budget here, the total expenses are $28,849,999. Why is there a difference?
Yes. And I will probably defer to Joe on this, but my understanding is that it comes out of, that additional amount is what has come out of fund balance. Joe, do you want to, you'll do a much better job of explaining this than I will.
So you want to, Russ, you want to know the difference between the expenditures in the Ops Committee budget and the one that
No.
was...
Not this budget, these two.
Those 2 sheets.
One shows 28.8 and one shows 26.5, and it's because of this $2.3 million adjustment, so just what's that adjustment?
The difference would be the amount of prior year surplus that had to be put into revenues.
Okay, well, so that I got a couple of things. So I understand, we're not talking about the revenue.
Right.
So the revenue is at $29,064,558.
Okay.
And I understand that that number comes from essentially the 24 million, and then we're adding 4.8 million in fund transfers. I understand one fund transfer, which is approximately 2.3 million, which essentially brings it to break even.
I believe if you add up the total expenses in excess of revenues over expenses, do those add up to the number that you're looking for?
They don't.
Not quite.
Close?
close.
They don't,
Very close.
because there's one transfer that brings the budget to break even, which to my mind should be 26.5 million. And then there's another transfer of 2.5 million that takes it to the 29 of roughly.
I believe.
The differences in the adjustments.
Yeah, there's a 2.5
If you
million transfer that I don't understand. Because the other thing is the fund balance, if we're doing another 2.5 million, should be $800,000. So I understand the one fund transfer. The one fund transfer essentially brings the budget to break even. So we need to transfer $2.3 million to bring the budget to break even.
I believe that 2.3.
Yeah,
Is
the
the transfer from-
adjustments, the transfers are the difference between those two numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
The transfers to the housing and to parking maintenance are the difference between those two numbers.
It's off by $2.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's $2.
$2 off, Joe.
And we take those out on the sheet because we'd be double counting.
So someone will have to explain it to me afterwards because I'm not following it. All right. I understand the one transfer to bring us to break even. Is there a $2.5 million transfer to make a bond down payment or something like that?
You know, if you took this number out, that number would be this number, minus $2. If you add it in. Right, because it's a negative number, so if you took that number out and just added those, it would be this number. So it's the fund transfers, which is the difference. These two, if you add this number back in, it comes to 28,849, 997, so it's $2 off.
Yeah, I don't care about $2.
We could each throw in a quarter.
Okay.
We'll go over it after.
Does that make sense?
I want to make sure people are reasonably
Okay.
comfortable, though, with what we're doing here. I mean, is this...
The difficulty is that the budget we have in the form here is fairly understandable. The form that the auditors require for submitting to the city does not directly align with what ours is because of accounting rules. So it is even challenging for me to understand.
So, may I ask a question? Then technically, which one of these are we approving, per se?
We're actually approving this.
I want to make sure I'm...
Yeah, we are approving this because this is what is submitted to the city.
Okay. Okay.
And this.
Yeah, that doesn't, right, but it doesn't, it matters only in terms of this, because this doesn't account for the transfers of funds.
All right. Have we gotten to a comfort level to vote on this?
It's just the detailed view for,
Yeah.
this is the.
Yeah, essentially, yes.
You're
Basically, if you take,
make sure you're
yeah,
comfortable.
if you look at the expenditures category, that 28,849 that Russ is looking at, and you subtract the transfers from that number into the housing fund.
No, I understand there's a transfer number and there's a loss number. And there's monies that are transferred to account for the transfer, and there's transfer from previous years to cover the 1 year loss. And one's an internal transfer number,
Yeah.
and one is a transfer from a previous year.
Yes. And they show up on different lines.
Correct.
One shows up in, some shows up in expenditures, some shows up in revenue.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Are you comfortable with what we are proposing?
Go for it, man.
All right, are we ready to vote on the resolution put forward, the fiscal year 2015 DDA budget? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who do not support? Thank you. Our next item is resolution to continue support and enhancement of transportation projects, facilities, and programs. On page 12, you will find that resolution. Is this, Keith, is this yours?
This is me. So first, I'd like to put it forward.
I will support.
All right, there we go. And this one will be real easy because there are no numbers involved in it at all, other than maybe years or something. Well, actually, there are some numbers, but we're not approving anything, so as far as numbers go. This is largely in response to the idea that there is a millage being proposed, as Martha was talking about in the earlier portion, and of course, we're all very aware of since we support transportation, and in fact, this is what this is about. The most, I think the last two whereases say it most succinctly, that we have a keen interest, because if this millage passes, a certain amount of that would come to the DDA through TIF. And so what this is doing is assuring that our dedication to transportation continues, and specifically recognizing that additional revenues would be coming our way as a result of this millage, and that we would enhance our support. So it says, whereas the Ann Arbor DDA has a keen interest in using these new millage funds for transportation-related purposes in support of the DDA's renewal plan, referring to the 2003 renewal plan, which specifically mentions transportation. And whereas these purposes may include, are not limited to, and it lists several transportation projects that have been on our radar, but we have not had the funds to support recently, or enhanced versions of it have not been able to. So resolved, if the voters support approval of the new year five-year transit millage, the DDA, which has been a longtime supporter of transit as a key strategy to meet its mission, will work to increase its support for transportation-related programs and projects. Questions?
Why are we working to increase? I mean, it seems to me that the purpose of this is to assure voters that we will sustain our funding, and that with additional funds assessed, we won't be withdrawing funding.
Well, we're also, if this passes, there would be, it's estimated about $90,000 additional dollars would be coming our way, which coincidentally is about what our support of the circulator was in the past, for instance. So we're not doing a this doesn't refer to like any sort of quid pro quo. You pass this, we'll spend this. But it does say that we understand that if this passes, the voters have voted for it as a transportation enhancement. Okay.
I think Russ's point's a good one, though, is whether we want to commit to an increase, whether this is the right vehicle for that, as opposed to using the word support or sustain. I think that's a pretty valid question, whether this is the right place to. Do you have a word increase?
Well, on the other hand, it doesn't say it's not a quid pro quo, it's not dollar for dollar. And I think Russ's point was well taken. We don't want to diminish what we do, but I think we want to look to have some amount of increase in transportation-related expenditures.
And that is what the result says. We'll work to increase its support for transportation-related programs.
Anyone else have any concern about the wording? Are people comfortable with it?
I think it's a general statement of support and our intention to continue our support and increase it if we deem it possible.
It doesn't say that. It says we will increase it.
We'll work to.
Should either be clear or we should be clear one way or the other.
Are you offering an amendment to the?
Maintain or increase. We will maintain or increase its support for transportation.
Is there support for Russ's?
Worded that way, I'm comfortable with it. We'll work to.
No, just maintain.
Will take out the word work. Will maintain or increase its support for transportation.
Friendly amendment?
I think so.
Okay. Any other concerns?
Not concerned. I think it's consistent with what the DDA has done with other taxing jurisdictions as far as investing our TIF back into facilities, back into grants. And I think it's also consistent with much of the discussion that's occurring right now in Lansing regarding DDA reform. So I see this as being consistent with not only the DDA's past practice and policies, but also where we may be forced to go by the legislature if certain bills become law, which right now is very active, an active possibility in Lansing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's helpful for our board in general as you pick up these tidbits along the way to share them. Any other questions, concerns before we go? No? Seeing none? All those in support, say aye.
Aye.
All those not in support. All right. We get to have a little fun. 4th and William Stair Elevator Preliminary Design Presentation.
Well, we're not actually giving a presentation, we're just sort of, we're not ready for presentation as of yet. And I have a couple, I don't know who has not seen these, if anybody has not seen them. They're sort of before and after pictures of what is being looked at the 4th and William parking garage. We had Mike Ortlieb and Josh Roseboom from Carl Walker and Carl Lukenbach, architect, visited us at the last operations committee meeting to sort of go over a preliminary look at this project. And again, I've got some renderings if somebody hasn't seen them. Essentially, we are taking an antiquated elevator and stairway and replacing the elevator with 2 new elevators and replacing the stairway with a new, more open stairway. And we are also proposing to do some facade work along the south and the east sides, more reflective surface, some awning around those sides to basically make the garage more attractive than it is from that angle. And the stairway elevator towers are glass enclosed, opening things up significantly. So those are just sort of the preliminary looks at the project. We've invited the design team back at our next operations committee meeting they took input from the committee and are going back with that input, and they're going to come back to us at the next operations committee meeting going forward with sort of a phasing and what are we calling the schematic design or what we expect to see next. And so I don't know if we're going to be ready for a presentation at our next board meeting on this project. I'm hoping so, but next operations committee meeting we will explore the project further.
As a point of clarification, just in case it slid by too quickly, this is really looking at sort of something of what I think of a master plan for improvements to this structure, and it may be the case that it will need to be phased over time. For instance, the facade improvements may not happen at the same time. So just so people understand, this is really trying to look at a long-term plan. And there was also some discussion about what it means if we were to repurpose the ground floor, which has been discussed a little bit. So there's some thinking that's going into the whole long-term plan for the deck.
And again, this garage has at least 30, probably 50 years of life remaining, and I don't think it should be living that life with its current elevated stair tower.
And it also reflects some of the things going on around. In other words, it makes the washing, the William Street side more pedestrian friendly, which is in keeping with the whole William Street corridor idea when the Y-lot gets developed. And that east-facing facade is recognizing, of course, that it's across from the Blake in terms of both the awnings, and also talk about doing a crawl that would have information for Blake customers.
So yeah, I'm hoping that we will be ready for a slideshow at some point in the very near future.
You got me all excited with the word presentation in there. Any other questions, concerns about this parking structure project? Seeing none, next, Get Downtown Go Pass funding for 2015. Keith, is that yours?
This is me again. Actually, a very quick report because last month we did go over a lot of the Go Pass programs and some of the metrics of its success. This has to do with the funding request that Nancy came to us with this year at the transportation meeting. The committee did have some further questions, as I recalled, specifically about some breakdowns in terms of 4 and 5, and then in the sort of lump sum of support for transportation options for downtown workers, visitors, and customers. There were a whole slew of things lumped together, and we wanted some more breakdown of that. So Nancy was going to come back in this coming month with that so that we can come with a specific funding request to this meeting next month.
Any
That's
questions?
all I had about that, I think.
Next committee meeting?
Next committee meeting.
Oh, yes. March 26th at 11 a.m.
Very good. We're ready to move on to the Partnerships Economic Development Communication Committee. First item we have is Ann Arbor Housing Commission grant request.
I think I get to give the report.
Yeah, I
since,
think Sandy and Joe deserted us, so I think
we
Bob's on the
we had two great discussions, primarily at the meeting. Both requests. The first came from Jennifer Hall, and I think most of you know that the Housing Commission's requesting $600,000 for Baker Commons and Miller Manor. Jennifer had additional financial information about that. There was a lot of discussion about the scope of the work, the timing of the payments from the DDA. And I think as was represented earlier in the meeting, she indicated that could be done over 3 fiscal years, which is helpful for us. There was no final action taken. Discussion will continue at the next meeting. The second request was from First Martin. Mike Martin was here to introduce the 120 West Huron project, which I think most of you know is a proposed hotel. And there was a specific request for a DDA grant to support project elements that benefit the public. Streetscape, additional lighting, LEED certification, historic preservation of the bus facade were some of the things that were discussed. The committee decided to defer the request while it considers whether to create a new DDA partnership grant policy that would support projects like this. And we hope to have a draft policy at the next committee meeting, and that'll be the subject of discussion. I think we distributed the brownfield grant policy as as a type that we could adopt and use as a format for developing a grant policy for public improvement requests.
Does anyone have any questions, concerns about either of these two grant requests?
Okay, the next meeting is March 12th at 9 a.m.
Thanks, Mark. Do we have any other DDA business? Susan?
I've got a couple. The first, I've got a couple. The first is just, thought you'd find it interesting in light of our retreat. Progressive Urban Management Associates is a downtown consulting group. And a few years ago, they produced a trend report that was absolutely fabulous, trying to capture what we're seeing in downtown and what we're likely to see. They've just issued this again. They're working with University of Colorado. I think they had something like 35 graduate students going through international literature as well as national and so forth. And what they've arrived at, I think, will be beneficial to us as we consider our role in this particular downtown. Some of the findings, I think, won't come as a surprise. So, for instance, the quest we all have to find a way to capture that young, skilled workforce. But there's also, in addition to not forgetting the boomers, a point about the future really needs to be focused at women, because a lot of what we're seeing, we have to be thinking as women at the center piece of it, something that we're not at this point thinking. They're arriving.
What is the board doing wrong?
I think I know where we're going to start.
If they'd stop taking vacation.
Yeah. But a couple things
Thanks
that
for showing up, Susan.
A couple things that I think you'll find interesting. One of them is affordable housing is starting to hit the radar. That whole issue about that disparity in wages is starting to hit that discussion in downtowns, because downtowns used to be the place where the poor people lived and the rich people lived in the suburbs. It's starting to find its way to a tension point, whether it's New York City, and that was the campaign I think the mayor ran on, but the Bay Area and so forth. There's an interesting question that's developing about who can actually afford to live in downtown. And I think, to this DDA's credit, since I've been a part of it, you have always worried about making sure that people of all incomes, that diverse populations would be able to live in our downtown. And we're starting to catch up, I think, at the national level. I won't bore you by reading more of it, but things like the sharing economy, bike share, Zipcar, more and more around that, I think, is something we should be thinking about. And I'll just sort of leave it there just for you to sort of browse through. I think we'll find more things on our table as a result of these trends. A key question, I think, that will hit us sooner rather than later is regionalism. Transportation, I think, is something that we'll all be talking about a lot. They're capturing that here as well. So I thought you might find it interesting. This is best practice knowledge, international, national, and even more local, what's happening. And the other is just an FYI to the listening public. We have a closing date for the YMCA lot. We will be looking to close it after business, maybe 13th, 14th, 15th of March, something like that. We'll be getting out information to the public. We're going to start to let people know about it. It's very exciting. We're looking forward to a new project there, a higher, better use for that lot. So we're going to begin our process. I thought I'd begin by letting our board know that we're going to be closing the lot in a very thoughtful way where public, ATA, and others will begin to take things away. That's kind of exciting. It's the beginning of a new chapter along William Street. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Do we have any other audience participation? Yes.
A moment ago, I don't know if I want to stand up and talk. My name is Chang Wing Fan, but just watch this meeting is making me very excited. And I don't know what I'm going to say, but I do want to say something out of just for a long time. I think that by listening, by observe, and motivated. So what I want to make a comment is that how excited, how appreciative for me to feel in such a democratic country as American citizen from China. And I feel I gotta stand up and say something, even screaming, yelling, but at least I have the freedom and nobody can chop my head. Chang Ming Fan, I'm the president of Tiny Light World, Inc. We registered in Ann Arbor since 1996, in Ann Arbor. And graduate from University of Michigan. And I can say I'm an entrepreneur, inventor, and also I love the politics, especially involved with the public art and public safety. One thing I want to talk about technology is that I listen to what the meeting is about. Everything is in favor of the citizens, the people in Ann Arbor, and come to Ann Arbor. I like to contribute, as the other day, I say why I'm here, contributed what I learned from China and here since 1984. I came to this country from technology. My technology is tiny light. Let me just spell it for you so you can remember. TINILITE, 3 I's, 8 characters. This technology I have been developed since 1996, started from Ann Arbor. And it is time for me, if you can count the time when almost close to 3, and just, so I know, I mean less than.
You have 2 minutes.
So, the point I want to make is that Ann Arbor is represent the United States, have the problem of a surplus and uneven distribution. I'm not talking about communism, I'm not communist. But I do think there are a lot of things we should do in order to make this town be the best town. Just like the 2005, Ann Arbor is the first city in this nation put LED light on the street. So why not we can continue inherit this legacy to make this town be another layer of using this LED light to create the light of art, an art of light. Use my technology free. So that's why I'm trying to learn to see what I should say. Although it's nobody going to chop my head, but I want to make a positive impact. So treat me as a student. And also treat me as a friend, although I don't have your sexy nose. I have a flat nose. So I want to say something about what I observed. There are so many technology communities here. It's in some far away, they don't come down here. And a lot of people looking for jobs in the West Coast and East Coast. I can tell a lot of examples. We have energy drain and talent drain. So maybe later I can talk more about, go back to my technology is tiny light, combine 6 clean technology, LED label concept, modulation, wireless, web, and the SBC or web. So now I thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Edward Vilmetti. I'd like to speak to you today about snow. We've had a lot of it. It's going to melt at some point. It's going to try to drain into the catch basins downtown. Some of them are blocked by snow and ice. And as a result, some intersections within the DDA have either enormous piles of snow blocking the pedestrian path, small piles of snow blocking the pedestrian path, or sometimes large puddles between the sidewalk and the street. I have tried to figure out who's responsible for the puddle, and it's very, very hard to figure out responsibility for that.
Engineers.
The sidewalk, the sidewalk clearing is the responsibility of the property owner, or in the biz area, the biz takes care of that. Clearing the street is the responsibility of the city. There's a stormwater management unit that has some amount of responsibility for stormwater, although I don't think they think of themselves as puddle watchers. When severe flooding occurs, the city will take out front-end loaders, as they've done, and clear the big piles of snow in the neighborhoods. But I don't really know who looks over the puddles in the street that cause people to walk around them or to not come downtown because they can't cross the street. I think the DDA has some role in that. Certainly as you're engineering things, you can engineer things so that the water drains more effectively. You can't do anything about the snow coming down. clearing the streets of snow is always going to help that. I know that's a long-term process of doing that. But the very sort of tactical, narrow question of who cleans the catch basin, I actually have a proposal for that. The Huron River Watershed Council, Jason Frenzel, has an adopted storm drain program that has been used to adopt drains in residential areas. It doesn't apply at this point to the downtown, but it would be, there's a point of contact there if you wanted to encourage property owners to maintain their own drains, or if business associations wanted to hire someone with a shovel and clear out the drains. It's at the level of shovel, or maybe a brush truck could do the trick. But it's a serious problem. I think the intersection that I took a picture of 4 years ago, Church Street at South U near the Chinese restaurant in that corner, has been bad, was bad 4 years ago and is bad now. I don't know that it's impassable, but it's not the quality that you'd expect if you were looking at a sidewalk and with some amount of pride and saying, you know, all of our citizens can cross the street without impediment. So, 1 minute. 1 minute? Okay, so like I say, I don't know who's responsible for it. I think a better job could be done. I think the amounts of money involved are small compared to the benefit of sidewalk clearing, and especially clearing crosswalks. There's probably some ADA considerations there as well in the long run. If the crosswalks are blocked all winter, then that's probably not a good thing from the disabilities perspective. And so I encourage you to take a look at that at some future meeting.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who would like to speak with us? All right. Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second?
All those in support?